We're all on this quest for happiness, right? But what if the real keys to our well-being are kind of hidden in plain sight? Well, today we're going to unpack three brand new studies from psychology that are just fascinating. They reveal these surprising forces that shape how we feel every single day, all the way from the culture we live in down to the fleeting thoughts inside our own heads. So what really makes us happy? Is it all about money, freedom, that perfect job? I mean, that's what we're often told. But is that really the whole picture? What if our well-being is tied to something, well, bigger, like the entire culture of our country, and at the same time, something as tiny as a thought that just flashes through our mind? Turns out that's exactly what the latest science is pointing to. So we're going to go on a little journey here, from the super broad, the macro, all the way down to the micro. We'll start with the beliefs of an entire nation. Then we'll zoom right into those momentary shifts inside our own minds. And finally, we'll look at the social situations we find ourselves in every day. All right, let's kick things off at the very highest level, our culture. You ever stop and think about how the unwritten rules of our society affect how we all feel? Well, a really fascinating new analysis gives us a big clue. So what these researchers did was pretty clever. They took data from the famous World Happiness Report and mashed it up with a huge global study on gender beliefs. They were hunting for a connection, specifically between a country's overall happiness and a very particular cultural idea about what it means to be a man. And this idea has a name. It's called precarious manhood. So what is it? It's basically the cultural belief that being a real man isn't something you're just born with. Nope. It's this fragile status that you have to constantly earn, prove to everyone, and, it can be lost in an instant. So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, the belief suggests that manhood is way more fragile than womanhood, and when it's threatened, men might feel pressured to react with aggression or by taking huge risks just to prove they still have it. And you can imagine, this creates this constant underlying pressure, and not just for men, but for the whole society. And the impact? Honestly, it's staggering. The study found this incredibly powerful link. Countries where these precarious manhood beliefs are stronger, they consistently have lower national happiness. But wait, it doesn't stop there. Those same countries also tend to have lower GDP, shorter life expectancies, less social support, and higher levels of corruption. It's just a stunning connection between one single cultural idea and the health of an entire nation. Okay, so we've looked at the big picture. Now let's zoom way, way in, right into the individual mind. We usually think of our personality traits as being, well, pretty fixed, right? You are who you are. But what if some of those key traits are actually changing all day long, from one moment to the next? Well, a new study is doing just that. It's challenging this whole idea of stable traits, specifically when it comes to something like narcissism. It suggests that maybe we don't have narcissism, but we experience it in these temporary states that go up and down all day. And get this, these little fluctuations are tied to another really powerful feeling, perfectionism. Okay, so first, we gotta understand that there are really two faces of narcissism. You've got grandiose narcissism, that's the classic one, right? Feeling confident, superior, on top of the world. But then there's vulnerable narcissism, which is basically the total opposite, feeling insecure, super sensitive to criticism, and just underappreciated. And it's a similar story with perfectionism. It has two sides, too. Perfectionistic strivings are actually pretty positive. That's your drive, setting high standards for yourself. But then you have perfectionistic concerns, and that's the dark side. It's that constant nagging worry about making a mistake and being judged for it. So you might be wondering, how on earth did they track this stuff in real time? Well, they had 285 university students, and for a whole week, up to 6 times a day, a little survey would pop up on their phones, and it would ask them to rate their feelings of narcissism and perfectionism right there, in that exact moment. And the results showed this super direct link. Whenever students felt a surge of that grandiose narcissism, that feeling of being on top of their game, they also reported a spike in those positive perfectionistic strivings. But when they felt that vulnerable narcissism, insecure, fragile, it was tied directly to those perfectionistic concerns, that fear of messing up. It's like our internal states are in this constant shifting dance with each other. All right, time for our final level of analysis. We've done the big cultural picture, we've done the inner world of our minds. Now let's look at our immediate environment. Because let's be honest, For a lot of us, the social world can sometimes feel like walking through a minefield. We all know that social connection is like a cornerstone of being happy. But if you have social anxiety, that fear of being judged can turn even the simplest conversation into something totally exhausting. It just drains you instead of lifting you up. But a new study decided to ask a different kind of question. Instead of just assuming that all socializing is tough, they wondered, what if the context of the interaction is the real key? You know, the who, the where, the how. Could that completely change the game for someone with social anxiety? And they found two really powerful buffers that help. The first one, group size. It turns out that in small groups, we're talking 3 people or fewer, socially anxious individuals said their interactions felt way more playful and relaxed. And it makes sense, right? It's just less overwhelming. There are fewer social cues to track, and it feels like there's less judgment in the air. Now, the second buffer was even more of a surprise. Technology. Yep. When people with social anxiety used text, phone calls, or video chat, they actually reported having more meaningful conversations. Why? Because these digital channels give you a bit more control. You have more time to think and process before you respond, which just takes a ton of that face-to-face pressure off. And as one of the study's authors, Aurelio Fernandez, said, this really challenges that popular idea that face-to-face interaction is always the gold standard. It's not that simple. For some people, in certain situations, a digital connection can actually be better. Okay, so, wow, we've gone all the way from national culture down into our own private thoughts and then into our social choices. So what's the big takeaway here? What does it all mean when you put it all together? I think the single biggest takeaway from all 3 of these studies is this. Well-being isn't some destination you arrive at. It's more of a dynamic process. It's all about finding the right fit, getting the alignment just right between the world around you, the world inside you, and the situations you choose to be in. And you can see this playing out across all 3 layers we talked about. There's the cultural fit, being in a society with healthier norms. Then there's the psychological fit, understanding that internal dance between our confidence and our fears. And finally, the situational fit, actively picking social contexts like small groups or even just a text conversation that actually energize you instead of draining you. It's a really powerful shift in thinking, isn't it? It's moving away from just trying to be happy and moving towards actively creating the conditions for happiness. So the final question really is for you. When you look at your culture, your own mind, and your daily situations, what's one small change you could make, starting today, to create a better fit in your own life?